the Bengal Tiger, and on3.com. You can find him on social media. Great podcast, too. Dead period about to get picked up here, so recruiting about to get wild. LSU's got the number one recruiting class for the 2025 cycle. They got 9 commitments on the board, including 3 5-stars and top 10 overall prospects in the country. They got a lot of guys on the board. We're going to get into it here with our guy Shea Dixon, who's back with us on his Friday segment. Shea, good morning. How are you? Hang on one second. Got him?
All right, you got me?
Yep, got you, buddy. Good to have you back.
How are you guys?
All right, so dead period gets lifted up here. Is it next week?
Next week, yes.
So what's happening within the dead period? How are they totally out of contact?
No, you just can't have any in-person, face-to-face contact. So it pretty much turns into a point, the February dead period, where you kind of reset your board. You've handed out new offers. You're still handing out new offers, but you're kind of saying, all right, this is who we like, who's trending to us. If we have any offers we have not made that we want to go ahead and get out there, they do it. And that kind of all sets you up for when things open back up here in March. So next week, it'll be the open period for the first time since before signing day. So more than a month of not being able to see kids face to face, and they'll immediately kind of parlay that open week and, open stretch of being able to have kids in by bringing them all in next weekend, letting them see a football practice, and really having the biggest recruiting event so far to date this season. It'll be even bigger than the junior day they had in January.
Who are some of the guys that they have committed to be on campus?
I mean, it's kind of a who's who, really. You start at the top, DJ Pickett, a 5-star number 1 corner in the country. He is locked in now to return. He told Chad Simmons yesterday he's been one of Corey Raymond's big targets, kind of really across the first 2 months or month plus of him being on the job. And he had recruited Pickett while at Florida. So obviously with Pickett being a Florida kid or native of Florida, he had already known Corey. And when Corey got here, he quickly said, all right, I want to check out LSU. He did. Now he's coming right back again. So that's a big deal. James Simon will be back again. And I think he's got a couple of visits scheduled in March. But he's kind of their main target in state, him and Corey Adams over at Edna Carr on the D-line. But look at the receivers, too, that when you come off a number 1 offense, Heisman Trophy winner, and you've got Bryce Underwood, number 1 quarterback. You've got DeCorian Moore, number 1 receiver. You've got Harlan Berry, the number 1 running back in the country. You've got Teron Francis, the number 1 wide receiver in Louisiana, which is a pretty impressive kind of title to hold in its own. All those guys are committed. Now next weekend they'll have a 5-star in Caleb Cunningham, receiver in town, a guy who skyrocketed up the rankings in Cortez Mills, another 4-star receiver. Jamie French, a guy who was once committed to Alabama, who reopened his recruitment as one of the top receivers in the country coming out of Florida, a top 5 receiver nationally. He'll be back in town. So there'll be a slew of wide receivers, a bunch of O-linemen. Lamont Rogers, I know, is a guy that a lot of people have talked about coming out of Texas as a top 10 offensive tackle, I should say. And LSU's held the lead there on the on-3 RPM, so a lot of people have their eyes on him. Bo Davis will have some D linemen in, a number in from Texas, which obviously is an area he's recruited well during his time in Austin. They've got some edge rushers. Look, the number 2 linebacker in the country will be in. Blake Baker's got about 4 of his top linebacker targets coming, and they've even got 2026 guys. I mean, they'll have a number of rising juniors, guys who just wrapped up their sophomore season. So I think this will be – I've looked around at some other visitor lists. I won't be surprised if it's the most impressive group of visitors any college has on campus next weekend, and kind of a spot for LSU to get used to. When you have the number 1 class, you get the attention of a lot of guys around the country.
Shea, a name that's popped over the last couple of weeks has been on Brad Davis's board again is Micah Debose, a big-time interior offensive lineman out of the state of Alabama. At one point was committed to Georgia, and now seems like Auburn and LSU are making a big push. I know a lot of your guys over at On3 have made some RPM predictions that he could go to LSU. What have you heard on the big 4-star offensive lineman out of Alabama.
Yeah, he'll be back on campus, and once he steps foot on campus, I think everybody's got him on commitment watch. This was a prospect coming out of Mobile in Alabama, as you said, who was committed to Georgia for a while, decommitted in January, said he wanted to look around at schools, and Auburn was viewed as the team. Hugh Freeze has made him a big priority, but as the team to beat. And whenever he popped up at LSU right at the end of January before the dead period began, it was noteworthy because everyone thought he would probably just visit Auburn and be done with it. He didn't, and now you see that kind of as the dust settled from that visit that Brad Davis is once again making some serious noise. So when he gets back to campus, I'd put him on commit watch for sure. I think LSU does lead. He's one of the top interior offensive linemen in the country. They sent the coaches on the road to see him play basketball, so they've been all over him. And they've got the 2 top offensive linemen in Louisiana, Jordy, already committed. They've got Brett Bordelon, and they've got Devin Harper from up in North Louisiana. So a New Orleans guy, a Shreveport guy, both on board. And now you're starting to look outside the state. I do think they end up signing, once again, I think they signed 3 Texas offensive linemen last cycle. I think they'll get a couple out of Texas once again. But when you look at these kind of border states / southeast states they can be in, Bama's getting deeper and deeper, in that Mobile area is one that a number of teams can recruit, even if Auburn and Alabama want them. So I think they sit in a good spot for DeBose, certainly in the lead.
Shea, KeShawn Moses, I saw his ranking as far as a linebacker has gone up. You know, KeShawn is one of these guys that we've talked about as the face and voice of this class. But on the field, as he's going through his 7-on-7 season and heading into his final summer of recruiting, what type of player and what type of ranking is KeShawn getting at the linebacking spot?
I mean, he's pretty unanimously considered across the board one of the top 25 linebackers in the country. That makes you a top 250 prospect. Let's see, right now in the On3 industry rankings, a top 5 player in Louisiana, which is, as we see with this class, we're getting deeper and deeper in terms of guys we're finding out there. I mean, JT Lindsay out of Ash, Alexandria jumped from basically, it wasn't ranked by anyone. He didn't have many offers, and he goes all the way up to a top 150 prospect and the number 11 running back in the country. So to be a top 5 player in Louisiana this cycle, like Moses is in the industry rankings, is a big deal. And look who he's surrounded by. I mean, Barry, Antoine, Devin Harper, or the guys ranked right ahead of him, and James Simon, who remains uncommitted. And then behind him, J.D. LaFleur, the son of David LaFleur, who's already committed to LSU. And then in that top 10 is Teron Francis as well. I think that if Keelan's been the leader here, I think that if LSU continues this run, that we can look up once again at the end of the cycle and all top 10 guys are committed to LSU, or at least every guy that they've been pursuing. And it won't surprise me at all if that's the case. This is one of those cycles where, thanks to guys like Keelan, who are not only great football players and highly ranked and all that, but they really take the time to recruit guys and spend time texting them and corresponding with them in whatever ways high schoolers do now. But whatever it is, Keelan does it well. And he has said it. Remember, even when he was uncommitted, he said, whenever I commit, if it's to LSU, I will be the cornerstone piece. I will be the guy who sort of leads them to that number 1 class, and not in a cocky way, just in a straight up, I love LSU and I want to be able to kind of shout that from the rooftops. And he's done it so far. I mean, there hasn't been a commitment since he got on board that he didn't know about, that he didn't have a hand in. And look, we talked about DJ Pickett to lead this thing off, the number 1 corner in the country. This is the benefit of when your lead recruiter goes to high school on your campus, because at 3:00 that day he gets out of school and boom, all of a sudden he's popped up and he's on DJ Pickett's photo shoot with him and hanging out with him and kind of talking to him about the LSU experience. So I think fans appreciate it now. I think they'll appreciate it even more when they look back at this class and it coming together and what it finishes like, and knowing how big of a kind of an impact Keelan had on it.
How do they scout the portal right now, and what do you anticipate the action in the portal to be once it opens up here with LSU, knowing that the needs that they have?
Yeah, I mean, I think D tackle or, D linemen, hand in the dirt, interior linemen are number one on the priority list, and for good reason. Obviously, they've taken a major hit at that position. They had a number of backups transfer, and then you had the guys go pro. So you're getting Guillory back was big, but other than that, Jalen Lee was the only guy you returned. Yes, you signed Dominic McKinley. That was massive. You signed a guy like Sean Washington out of JUCO. So you've got a guy who's coming in that's not immediately from high school and's got has had some time to grow and mature his body and his game, and maybe can be relied on for some snaps pretty early on. But you'd want some more experience there. If not starting experience is really what you want. So I won't be surprised at all from talking to sources if they get one, if not two, defensive linemen out of the portal. I know a lot of people continue to say DB or corner. The other thing is, I'm looking at the depth chart, and guys, we'll see practice next week. They have so many DBs on the team. It's just a matter of developing guys, getting them out there, making sure they're in the right positions, making sure they're kind of in positions to succeed, and then you take it from there. I'm not sure how heavy they would be unless some bona fide, no doubt guy came in the portal at DB. For me right now, beyond D-line guys, and correct me if I'm wrong, I almost look at the depth chart and say running back is where you have to go and pick up a guy with the uncertainty of Trey Holly, and we'll see what happens there. But regardless, even with Trey Holly, that's 4 scholarship players, and one of them would be a true freshman in Caden Durham. Not the true freshman can't help out at running back, but we know they've got Josh Williams. In spring ball, Caleb Jackson will be the only other scholarship guy there. I think that looking forward, and Caden Durham arrives this summer, looking forward to kind of after spring ball when that portal window opens, I think that LSU will be one of those teams, 2 running backs around the country that kind of has that, not advertising it, but that has that, they're facing that reality of, hey, look, we need someone in the portal. It may not have to be a bona fide starter. I think you've got that, but you need another depth piece. I mean, look, they had 9 guys on scholarship last year at running back, and we'd go through games where 3 or 4 of them were hurt or not able to play or weren't with the team or whatever it was. So navigating a season with 3 or 4 running backs to start out is not something that any coach kind of wants to go through. I think 5 sort of the minimum there. So I'm watching the portal to see if they don't go for a running back.
Speaking of running backs, Shea, one name that's continuing to jump up the charts here for the class of 25 is a player out of Alexandria Senior High School at Ash, JT Lindsay. Obviously, everybody's looking at Harlem Berry. James Simon's the other running back in this class, but where's Lindsay stack up as far as the class is concerned?
Well, in the rankings, he went from unranked to top 150 and on 3, and that made him the number 11 running back in the country. So
wow.
If you look at it, the top 11, but I guess it's easier to say of the top 12 running backs in the country, 3 of them are here in Louisiana. Dang. And obviously Harlem Berry's committed. He's the number 1 running back in the country. They want James Simon. That's kind of the next guy they want to see pop and get on board. But beyond that, it's, if you get James Simon, you've got Berry and James Simon, are you good there? Or do you say, no, we probably need to take one more? If that's the case, then I think that JT Lindsay is a guy who moves firmly into that spot. I mean, everybody around Ash has been screaming about him since he had a really big junior year and kind of said, hey, look, he's a total package from the track side to the classroom to the production on Friday nights and the on-through rankings team. Look, they're the guys who put Harlem Berry at 1. They're the guys who had James Simon in the top 10 of running backs from the start, and he had a fabulous year going all the way to the Dome. And then they sat and watched every one of JT Lindsay's games and said, look, this kid isn't far off from them. He's one of the best backs in the country, and that's why he made his debut right there in the top 150. And now he's been stacking up offers. And look, there's Jasper Parker over at Shaw. He's got offers from Bama, Penn State, a number of schools. I'd say just glancing over the list, there's 7, 8 running backs in Louisiana this cycle that'll sign FBS, like high-level D1 Power 5 football, which is a pretty notable big deal for Louisiana.
Damn. Shea, you're the best in the business that covers recruiting. One of them from a couple of years ago's name just popped up over at A&M and Jacoby Matthews. I know that there's rules on this stuff, but there's also waivers, and the NCAA feels like a pretty fragile organization right now. Is there any chance that Matthews could end up in Baton Rouge?
From just digging around to sources, I don't think that they're going to make any move here. And I think, at least from hearing on the A&M side, it just doesn't seem that Matthews and the Elko camp saw eye to eye on things with the coaching shift. And perhaps he stayed, gave him a shot, and then feels like he's a better fit elsewhere. But the SEC is the one who's got this. If you don't leave or if you don't transfer to another SEC school by the February window, the deadline, then you can't. Unless you're a graduate transfer, which he's not. So they have not budged on that. Like a year from now, the SEC could change the rule and just say, hey, look, do whatever you want. That's what the NCAA is saying right now. I mean, they're allowing 2-time transfers without sitting out. So I think those days, and I've asked a couple of coaches just that, Jordy, well, when you get a waiver, I think the answer for most of them was like, we're in a spot where the SEC's put their foot down on this. He won't be the only guy that would try to go from one to the other school without graduating. So they don't want to open that door. And with the NCAA waivers and the SEC are kind of dead because they've already said, do whatever you want. Transfer once, don't sit. All right, transfer again, don't sit. So it feels like until they come up with some concrete resolution here on what exactly are the transfer rules, are they kind of for every conference? Do conferences like the SEC put their own rules in where after a certain date, you can't go from one school to the next in the conference? We'll see. But for right now, they feel like waivers are sort of a thing of the past and aren't going to be taken all that seriously and would take forever to get pushed through and might have to go into court. And beyond that, just with the specific scenario of a guy like Matthews, LSU doesn't appear to be pursuing. But at the same point, look at a school like Bama. That's a school that's really talking about this because the dead period basically ended when they started looking for guys. So they said, hey, look, don't worry about it. You'll be able to have the spring portal window. Well, there'll be no SEC kids in the spring portal window that they could take, from another SEC school. So now they're the ones who are having to say, well, we can only choose from out-of-conference kids. Like I said, I think a year from now, let's see what all these coaches think about it and if that SEC rule doesn't go away. But this year, they're sticking to it.
Shea, you mentioned it. Spring football starts on campus next week here in Baton Rouge for LSU. What are some storylines that you're looking for?
I mean, the defense obviously is going to be the biggest storyline. I'm with Brian Kelly. I think they've got things figured out on offense, and that's not to say they'll finish with the number one offense in the country again. But if you start with an offensive line and they return 4 or 5 starters and feel pretty good about DJ Chester, then you're usually pretty good on offense. And we saw Nuss get a W. We know what Caleb Jackson and Josh Williams can do. We've seen Kyron Lacey, and we've seen the production C.J. Daniels had, and we know that they've got, obviously, Aaron Anderson, Hilton, took a nice transfer, and Xavier Thomas, and then have a ton of tight ends that people are really excited to see about, led by Mason Taylor, who is going to, those tight ends are going to have a really big role now that Jaden's gone, and it's Nuss at quarterback. So I almost, in a way, I mean, I like watching the offense, but I kind of skip past it. I'm ready to see who's out there on the D-line. How are they moving things around with Bo Davis and Kevin Peoples coaching that group? What does Harold Perkins look like at, the linebacker spot that they're trying to put him at now and moving forward into the 2024 season with Baker being the DC and linebackers coach? How does he handle him? And then obviously it's safety. You've got a transfer coming in Jordan Gilbert. You took some transfer corners. You've got some young corners. And the same at safety. I think DB is the most intriguing. Sure, D-line, but there's just, I think they have like 21 or 20 DBs on roster right now. And you could make a case for well over half of them to be in the mix. So I kind of want to see. And some people say you can't learn anything from spring ball. Well, Malik Neighbors tore everyone apart last year in the spring ball. We all saw it. That was pretty indicative of what was to come. And it was that same stretch when we saw Denver Harris repping third team. And people were like, well, what's this about? Well, it never changed. So I do think there are some things you can glean from spring ball. And I don't know if we'll see it across this first week before they go on spring break, but across these 15 practices, I am eager to see what this defense looked like, because you clean house like that, you finish 100 and something in the country after finishing one on offense, then Brian Kelly's right. It's for good reason. all eyes are on your defense.
Last one, Shea D. I'll get you out of here. Good to catch up with Shea Dixon from 0-3. Make sure and follow his work at Shea Dixon, especially now with the dead period being lifted just next week. LSU welcomed 13 members of the class of 24 early that'll be taking part in spring, including and plus the junior college edition of Shea Washington. How about some of these new faces? Have you heard anything on them since they've been on campus? And I guess we'll be looking at all of them next week.
Yeah, we will be. Look, I think one guy that keeps getting talked about more and more and more and more is Gabe Relaford. Mm-hmm. And well, he was a back-to-back all-state type of player coming out of Evangel, put up gaudy numbers, runs well, just got great length. I think he's just a kid who we had him finish as basically a top 50 prospect nationally, one of the best defensive linemen in America, and that's a position that they need help at. So where does he fit in immediately? I don't know, but he's a really talented young piece. I think they got some talented young linebackers. Obviously, Colin Hurley's already here at quarterback. But for me, it's probably Relaford, a guy I'm watching. Shea Washington coming out of JUCO is the guy I've got an eye on, just because I think that they need someone at that D tackle spot who's got some experience and isn't coming straight out of their senior year of high school. And the more and more buzz, look, we knew Joel Rogers and Deshaun McBride were 4-star safeties and these big players here in Louisiana. But a guy who started to make noise, the more people I talk to, is Mississippi's 7A Defensive Player of the Year, P.J. Woodland, coming out of the Hattiesburg area at Oak Grove. And now he comes down here, signs as a DB. He's going to play corner. He's going to need some time this summer with the strength and conditioning program for sure. But they like how he can play that position, and we obviously know they need some help there. So maybe keeping an eye on his name, P.J. Woodland, the only guy out of Mississippi they signed this cycle, but a pretty good one. Max Prep's Defensive Player of the Year in the state.
Shea, great to catch up. We'll talk next week.